Welcome back. We're looking forward to continue Bez Hashem on the end of page 252 where we left off. This is Igeres Yudches that we're doing, the 18th epistle of the Alter Rebbe in this very unique segment, Igeres HaKodesh. As we mentioned so many times, very distinct segment. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya Kadisha has 5 segments, which again, we do mention it. For the newcomers, there is precision in that number. Tanya Kadisha is known to be the Torah Shebiksav of Teres Achsidus. That's 5 segments. This is the 4th, distinct from the first 3, which are the Likutei Amorim, Shaykh B'Emunah, and Igeres HaTshuva. Each one, basically, the 2 latter, Igeres HaKodesh, is Shaykh B'Emunah, a 12-chapter segment, which is about Achdus Hashem, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is the whole subject, Yichud Ilah, Yichud Tata, the Achdus, Yichud, that oneness, which we live a life identified and associated with this Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So it's a subject in this very 12 chapters, presented the Alter Rebbe in the unique and imitable way of the Alter Rebbe, explaining Achdus Hashem, Achdus Hashem. In Shar Yichud B'Emunah, there's nothing like it, nothing other safer. Demonstrates to the human intellectual mind that they can appreciate on every level that unique the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this very unique way the Alter Rebbe presents. But it's a subject of Achdus Hashem in these 12 chapters. He gives us a tshuva. It's a segment all about the unique mitzvah of tshuva. So unique is, again, because tshuva is the greatest gift Hashem gave mankind, particularly Am Yisrael. It's an important subject, one of the most important subjects in Torah. So it has a presentation now. Likutei Amorim, of course, is lengthier, 53 chapters. They are different. You could group different segments of Likutei Amorim, but nonetheless, the Aveda, the Beinani, the Rebbe calls Yevishal Beinani. So there's a whole, like I say, it's not as easy to identify as the Shaykh B'Emunah and Igeres HaTshuva, which every chapter speaks about the message of Achdus Hashem and the message of Tshuva. In this case, Likutei Amorim, it's an overall manual for the Eved Hashem, for the Beinani, the average person, if you will. So this is Likutei Amorim, sequential, though every chapter is sequential from the previous chapter, and so on. Igeres HaKodesh is different. Igeres HaKodesh is letters given different place, different scent, even though it would be to all Anash, and eventually for all of Am Yisrael, eventually for perpetuity, not only at the time when it was given, presented, but nonetheless, the way it's set up, it was letters which were written addressing different ideas, which went on at the time, Alter Rebbe's times, which he felt he had to address. Every letter, there's different ideas which are spoken in one letter to the other. And different times, Alter Rebbe cross-references from one letter to the other. The Alter Rebbe, he wrote Mishikosafti Shtaka that I wrote last year on this subject, which is another Igeres as an example, but they're Igeres, they're separate. So as I say, it's this thing, we spoke about this so many times, but we always mention there's always a newcomer, more than a newcomer, and even one newcomer. This is Igeres HaKodesh, the 4th segment of Sefer Tanya, unique in its kind. Before we continue, we did have a presentation in the beginning of 10. There's a backdrop on the overall Igeres HaKodesh, additional to what we just mentioned. Presented in the beginning of 10, Igeres Yud, which is 8 back. You could easily access it namely on the original website of this class, tanyaonline.com. It's broadcasted elsewhere, but the original website is tanyaonline.com. Tanya, easy, tanyaonline, one word.com. You have all the previous classes lined up from the very beginning of the Likutei Amorim, very beginning of the first segment, for that matter. This probably is the 5th class on this Igeres Yudches, which the latter classes are lined up on the top. So it's truly easy, very easy to access. And again, if you're a newcomer, to understand what we're learning over here, it's a click away. And to get from the very beginning of this Igeres, it's a few clicks away. So we're going to continue where we're holding. Of course, with a tiny little recap, but basically to continue, because the message in this chapter, in this Igeres, is easy, easily accessible on this very site, tanyaonline.com. All the classes are lined up, and again, the way it's set up, the ladder classes are on top of the page, on the left side of the screen, and it's just a click away. So we're holding over here on Dahainu Lias Chozik Ba'amitz Libi Begibayim Lias Ava Masuteres Niglis Begilirav Bechol Koiches Vechelki Anefsh Beguf. Dahainu. This is where we left off of the Bakoil Mikoil Koil. So Alter Rebbe speaks about the two Avas, the two loves which exist within the Yid, which the Yid has the ability to extract them, which is Avo B'ta'anugim, a pleasurable, delightful love, and that's not really accessible to every single Yid. The Simchut Tzadikim Hashem, it's the unique Yid, the Yid who is maybe even a level of the Tzadik according to the Beinoni, but it's the idea that someone's whole life is truly engulfed in excitement of serving a Kodesh Baruch Hu, serves a Kodesh Baruch Hu on a constant basis, which if it's in the tzaddik itself, we know there's so many different levels of tzaddikim. Alter Rebbe writes in the Kitab Amarim, there's revoves levels, tens of thousands of levels of tzaddikim. And again, if you learn Alter Rebbe's understanding and appreciation of tzaddik, we could easily appreciate what is this idea of revoves, of level tzaddikim. The moment we understand the Alter Rebbe's message, the Alter Rebbe's description of the tzaddik, we can understand why it would be divided into tens of thousands of levels, because the whole idea of tzaddik is that it's a beginning of making a dent in the nefesh bahamis, a transformational dent in the nefesh bahamis, in the animal soul. Of course, this is saying this briefly, but that's what. So from the time the person starts making a dent till the tzaddik gomer, which completely transformed the nefesh bahamis. Of course, there's so many, just so easy to understand why there'd be tens of thousands, myriads of tens of thousands of levels, till the tzaddik gomer completely transformed the nefesh bahamis. So it's simchut, these types of yidin on all levels of tzaddikim, but namely the more the tzaddik, the more the simchut tzaddikim Hashem, the more this becomes something which is experienced, this ava b'tanugim, that the yid has a delightful, pleasurable love in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not a gemachter ava in Yiddish would be just like, I love Hashem. You really love Hashem? Till the sandwich comes in front of you and you start loving other things. Not the bad way, but to say I love Hashem is a thing. It's not it's a passionate experience, a famous Rambam, like a certain party which you can't get off your mind and so on. But here it's not only just something you can't get off your mind, the real tainug, the pleasure of the Yid is in the Lukus. Of course, that's a important level. Alter Rebbe says not everybody could reach it. Even if you want to try to reach it, the person has to be shalom, complete in his Yid Shamayim. Simchut tzadikim Hashem. Where has the simcha? There's someone who's on the level of the greater level in their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They can have that ava rabba b'tanugim. Alter Rebbe alludes to it. We mentioned it in the beginning of Tanya. There's an ava which is kriyish b'eish. The person is driven to Lukus, but then there's the delight. He's one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that pleasure is a very palpable pleasure. It's an experiential pleasure in the Lukus, not anything else. In the Lukus, in Hashem. Of course, it's a great love. Does it exist within the DNA of the Yid? Yes, it does. But in order to have it on the surface, to have it to be experiential, person has to be on a certain level. Then the Alter Rebbe crosses the Hashenis, the other ava, which this is more associated with the norm, the nevesh mizava ve'evet chafeitel lidav kabei litzberit v'ritzirachai, that every Yid has a desire to connect and tie himself with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and appreciates the closeness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it aspires to that desire, and the Rama it's so bitter and it's so not good to sever, to distance that relationship. That every Yid has. We give example of a child in an amusement park wants to go every ride and it's all excited about being there and enjoying the day with the parents, and they turn around, they don't see any of the parents or anybody they recognize. Everything is shatters in a split second. And that's all. And someone will go over to them, here, take a bracelet. We're going to give you a free ride today in any prize off the shelf. Not interested in anything. They want to connect to their parent. And the moment they see their parent, the rush, the drive, the gravitation to the parent is so evident, because to the child, the disconnect with a parent is the hardest experience. Again, we mentioned a little bit more in elaboration, but it's associated with the Yid. This is an innate expression of the Yid, that I want to constantly be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I never want to sever my relationship. I never want to disconnect, even for a moment. Not even for a moment. And when someone would tell the child, about 10, 15 minutes you'll see your parents, they lose them. They're in a lost state, because no, I want to be connected with them now. I want to be close to them now. I can't wait 15 minutes. That is the natural expression by the Yid. I never want to sever my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even for a moment. And of course, it takes toil, so I will toil to be careful with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean, severing relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? One violates in action and speech and thought, in audio or vision. In other words, they are completely aligned with this which Hashem desires. That's what makes it or breaks it, if you will. In other words, someone aligns themselves with the Ratzon Hashem, with what Hashem wants, then they are connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chas v'shalom, someone compromises, it's a disconnect, and no Yid wants to be disconnected from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nefesh kisechta, says the Zayir Tova, even Nefesh, which is the lowest level of the 5 names of the Neshama, 5 levels of the Neshama, known to be Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechid, but even Nefesh. Nefesh kisechta, says the Zayir, puts a question mark. The Nefesh kisechta is a pasuk in Torah. Deals with the soul that sins, this and this. It has to do in the context of carbon and sacrifices, but the Zayir picks up on those. Nefesh kisechta. A nefesh, everyone wants a tisechta. A nefesh, no one wants famous expression of the Alter Rebbe. A Yid nicht der will and can sein abgerissen von HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A Yid never wants to, never can even disconnect, sever the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is an ava which is related to every single Yid. And every single Yid could identify with this ava. And the Alter Rebbe, but nonetheless, because it's an ava mesuteres, it's not fair that we're really recapping taking too much time to recap, because it's truly, really a quick way. So we're going to try to make this even more brief to get to where we're holding now. So the Rebbe goes on to, nonetheless, this is ava mesuteres. This is a hidden love, and because it's a hidden love, the nefesh bahamis, the ruach shtus, the spirit of foolishness, could somewhat start governing on it, because it's hidden. It's not a overt experience of overt connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a pleasurable, delightful connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, pleasure with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, nothing can cover that, because the pleasure, the core is there with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a very exciting, beyond exciting way. In this case, this is more the determination of the Yid, which is associated with the Ava Mesuteres. We explained this all, and therefore the Nefesh could have a say, could start governing and throwing signals, foolish signals, of course, but nonetheless signals which could deviate the person and confuse the person in their avodas Hashem, and therefore personal kain avodas Adam l'kain. This is where we need avodah to strengthen ourselves over the klipa. And the Alter Rebbe says, "Bakoil mikolkel," get rid of it completely. What is completely? If they see the last week's class, starting from machshava dibur ma'isa, action, speech, and thought. But yet there's the inner workings of the Yid again. You have to see the last week's class, which is his midas, his seichel, and his midas, his intellect, and his means. And that Yid Alter Rebbe established in the very beginning of Kutem Marmi. Yid does not necessarily have control over that. And that is the difference of the Bein and the Tzaddik. I'm saying this very succinctly, because we explained this last week, or the week before, I believe, is last week's class in Arichus Gdeila, with a great length and elaboration on this very idea. And so how does Alter Rebbe say Bakil Mikil Kos? Alter Rebbe says, work on it. As we mentioned that even in the doctrine of the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Amorim, where he speaks about the Beinoni not having that dominance over his inner workings of his Chochma Bina Das, or namely his Midas, but he says that, for example, a Yid, a Beinoni, has that bonus that which Hashem allows the Beinoni to identify with Avodah the Tzaddik every single day, and a person can do this 3 times a day, which is the idea of davening, as the Alter Rebbe explains there. Davening is the person, there's the total transformation of the Yid's interest. There's nothing other than the aspiration to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the 45 minutes or the hour of davening. This is a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? We're saying this quickly, but we see last week's class, which was based on the Lukuti Amorim, Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, and Yud Dalit for that matter, 12, 13, 14, a click away on this very site. Or wherever you're learning Tanya, this is one of the foundations of the Alter Rebbe. Yes, the Beinoni did not make a dent in his nefesh mahamis, in his animal soul, but Hashem bonuses and gifts the Beinoni that you, in that hour a day, and again, it could be is revived in the time of Mincha, and so too in the time of Ma'ariv, that sensation, but namely it's a time of Shachris, where a person could identify his Avodah, or rather identify with the Avodah of the Tzaddik, a total transformation of his inner workings, his Seichel and his Midas. His intellect could be completely full, if you will, and truly appreciate the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with his Chochmah, with his Bina, with his Das, with the wisdom, understanding, in knowledge, deep connection with the presentations which Torah itself presents in different areas of Torah, in different areas of Sfarim, in Tanya, in Chassidus, in Kabbalah, about the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu based on the predicated on the pasuk. Hashem says, "I want you to know me." And when a person's mind is full with this knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and of course that impacts his heart. Like generally, heart is impacted by mind, but usually there's another side of the heart by the average Beinoni, which is pumping in a different direction, sending signals in a different direction. And that is the gift of davening, that there could be a total transformation of the inner workings of the Beinoni, similar to the tzaddik. It's a tzaddik bonus hour where HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestows to the Beinoni, which is so exciting, by definition. Just understanding and appreciating this idea that the Alter Rebbe says it's a window, it opens up, it's on high. It's not really where you're holy. You're a Nefesh Bahamis. You're a Beinoni, which has a potent Nefesh Bahamis, and never made a dent on your Nefesh Bahamis in your animal soul. But nonetheless, I open a window on high that you could be similar to the Avodah of the Tzaddik in that time, in that hour of davening, as an example. So you got to see those chapters. Of course, it's exciting. It's very exciting. Problem is that it's not emes la'amita, because at the end of the day, the tzaddik has 24 hours, 24/7, this passion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Beinoni has struggles thereafter. Could he align himself with HaKadosh Baruch Hu 100%? Yes. Does he or she align himself with HaKadosh Baruch Hu 100%? Yes. If not, they're a Rasha, they're not a Beinoni. In where machshava dibra ma'asin, that is though in machshava dibra ma'asin, action, speech, and thought, where the person has 100% control and is able to take all those signals of the animal soul and say no to them, or say no to them in different ways. I am not going to speak this which Hashem says don't speak. I'm not going to do this which Hashem says don't do. I'm not going to think this which Hashem don't think. Don't entertain my mind with. I'm not going to look where I'm not supposed to, listen what I'm not supposed to. And on the kavanah say teiv, I want to relax, and I don't want to particularly interested in making the effort to learn Torah this full hour, which is allotted for me in my schedule, thus in halacha, how much I have to devote myself in that hour, 100%, and there's something with me who wants to be a little more laid back. And I say, no, what does Hashem want? Do I have control to learn that entire hour? Of course I do, and that's the life of the Beinoni. They never, ever violate, never disconnect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in action, in speech, and in thought. But what about the inner workings? They're challenged because they have a potent of Shemahamis to the exclusion of that time of davening. Again, that's why davening is such a true bonus for the Beinoni. Therefore, we have to tap into it every single day. Famous word of the Alter Rebbe, and you get every day. Of course, Hashem is giving you the scepter of the tzaddik every single day. Of course, a normal yid will tap into it. But that is the time of davening. So here the Alter Rebbe writes, he says, try to have that total transformation. But I can't because of the Beinoni. So Alter Rebbe is working with you, with the Beinoni, even as you're the Beinoni. And the inner workings is there where there is the challenge between the Nefesh Elikis, the Nefesh Bahamis, the godly soul, and the animal soul. So Alter Rebbe says, first of all, tap into the idea of davening. He doesn't say it so clearly over here, but he uses the term, the experience or the preparations or the build-up to davening in this following the following words: where we're holding, where we will continue. But Alter Rebbe doesn't limit it to davening. He says, get on with the program. You know where it's at. You know where the lukus is. You know where the emes of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Of course, you have the sensation of it by davening, but try to carry it over after davening. Try to be successful with that. Could you do it perfectly? Probably not. The tzaddik, yes, because that's who the tzaddik is. Transform the nefesh bahami, especially the tzaddik gomor and every tzaddik in between. They can have that, pull it through the entire day. As the lashon of the Alter Rebbe. The Beinoni not so much, but try to make this. You had a good davening that day, and that, besides the fact that if you really had a good davening, of course, it had an important impact throughout the entire day. That it becomes easier. I wouldn't say the word easier, but definitely there's clarity throughout the entire day. What is good, what is no good, what is holy, what is unholy, and what is the proper step to take, what is the improper step to take in every area of Avodas Hashem in action, speech, and thought. So try to carry it over. Try to make this is about kol mikol kol. Introduce the nefesh elikis, this avo. It takes effort, yes. A lot of effort, yes, because it's the Beinoni, and this is an avo which is mesuteres, which is covered, which is hidden. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, try to make it begilui rabba chol koiches hanevesh. Let's try to do this lias abba, this end of the fourth line on page 252, that the abba is that this hidden love should be nigla, should be revealed. The hidden love should be revealed. Begilui rabba, again, that's where it takes the effort with a great revelation. B'chol koiches chiluk hanevesh, in all the faculties of the soul, which is invested in the goof of the body. Really? All the faculties? Isn't that the life of the tzaddik? Says, work on it. Then the main thing is that in your intellect, in your thought, which is again in your mayach, your brain, that the intellect should constantly think and meditate and ponder based on how much the person ability, everyone's ability, how much they could appreciate, understand, perceive, intellectualize on the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, not beyond what I can. Something has to be suitable to me, not to someone else, or not beyond my capacity. And therefore, try to put something very big in a smaller box. No, it won't work, and the result will not be good, and the smaller box will probably rip, and so on. It has to be basic. You could broaden the horizons, if you will. You could broaden your capacity, and the Yid is meant to, but it always has to be kefisichla, because at the end of the day, it's about appreciating the message, not convincing oneself that they appreciate the message, truly appreciating the message, which is the idea of Chassidus in general, and namely Chassidus Chabad. I'll tell you, call this Chassidus Chabad, gave us the ability to really understand and perceive the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For real, that our intellect could understand the lakus, could understand godliness, based on the end of the Rambam. The Rambam writes, this is what the wholesomeness of the world and of Am Yisrael, which will come to fruition when Mashiach will come, that the human intellect will be able to perceive the das as Hashem, the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, it's to be kifi sichle v'askolase, not someone else's capacity, and then nothing will work, of course. But the idea is to utilize your intellect to appreciate, to understand, to think, to ponder, to meditate. But Baruch is the creator of the world. Baruch is the life of all lives in general. And Hashem is the life of your neshama as an individual in particular. And because of that, Hashem is the chayiv al-chayim, in other words, the flow of life, the source of life. And if there's life in my neshama and a life in my existence, in my consciousness, in my reality, it's Hashem, and not only in a general way to all of Am Yisrael, or the idea of Hashem as Chaya Chaim in the entire world, but particularly to Am Yisrael, but it's about me, Chayin Nishmasi Befrat, and I appreciate that. And of course, I will aspire and pine and desire these Davok Bay to cleave and adhere to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with a natural aspiration and desire. Interesting. This is mamash with the mashal we gave, like a child which aspires to be constantly next to the father. Or like the fire ascends constantly on high, naturally to its source. And this idea, again, so briefly, succinctly mentioned in this one-liner, but it's based on the Rambam, and the Alter Rebbe has it in the chapter 19 in Lekutei Amorim. It's being Neir Hashem Nishmas Odom, And the Alter Rebbe explains there that let's try to say this very briefly, that every matter in Elam Haza has its source. Basically, it's divided into four: Eish, Ruach, Mayim, for fire, air, water, and earth. These are the four elements which exist, which this is what Elam Haza is comprised of, and everything is associated, gravitates to its source. Therefore, everything gravitates downwards. As an example, take a pen, open your hand, it'll gravitate downwards. Why does it gravitate downwards? Because that's where its source is, basically, because everything the main component of everything is offer. To the exclusion of fire, the fire always ascends upwards. Never ever gravitates downwards, and again, different than everything else in creation. And why so? So the Rebbe writes there that in the end of the day, based on the Rambam, that for the same reason everything gravitates downwards, the fire gravitates upwards, because the source of Eish, also it's very different. It's not the actual fire. In other words, the source of Offer is Offer. The source of Ruach is Ruach. The source of Mayim, water, is actual water. Source of Eish, based on the Rambam, it's not the fire which we know, it's a certain gas or something. I'm not sure, can't describe it, but it's the source of fire. And the Alter Rebbe says, the Rambam writes, it exists on high, and the Alter Rebbe says, because it exists on high, just like everything naturally gravitates to its source. This fire gravitates to its source, and therefore, when you light a fire, it's always heading upwards. And the only thing which is holding it down is the wick, the match, or anything similar. But on its own, and therefore it just kind of jumps. It really wants to leave the wick. It really wants to be connected to its source. Not that it has it's such a beautiful presentation. Again, we shouldn't take the time to elaborate on this because there's another component. Alter Rebbe says, if you ask the fire, where are you going? And once you come to your source, you're going to be completely consumed and subsumed in your source, and you're going to lose your whole entity, even as a nice, beautiful flame. And the fire says, I don't care. I'm not interested in being an existing flame, even though it's beautiful. There's some self-respect, if you will, or self-identity. No, but I'm not interested in that. I'd rather be part of my source, and then I will return to nothing because there's no material of actual fire there. It's the source of fire, but there's no actual fire, and therefore it will return to nothing as no thing, and the fire says, I don't care. And where do you know this fire says, I don't care? You ever listen to fire? It doesn't talk, but look at its action. It's jumping. It wants to leave the wick. And we know where it's going. It's going to lose its identity 100%. But the fire doesn't care. I'd rather be part of my source than remain an entity on my own. And again, you got to see it. In Pedic, this is a Neir Hashem Nishmasad, and therefore why the Torah carefully compares the Yid to the candle, to the fire, because that's the innate and inherent aspiration of the Yid to be part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But again, you got to see it there. 19 Lukuti Amarim in the first segment. So Alter Rebbe says over here, when he speaks about the aspiration of the Yid to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is like a child who aspires to be constantly next to their father, like a fire which constantly ascends on high by its nature to its source. And that's this is what is the person's going to glean based on their understanding and appreciation and focus and pondering and meditating on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is their Chaya Chaim, their life, the life Bechlal, life of all living beings, and life of even the source of life, Chaye HaChaim. But beyond that, Chaye Nishma, so you look at yourself, there's nothing else in your neshama other than the energy coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as such, my desire is to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the more you'll diligently utilize your intellect to think and to understand, to ponder on this idea, which is this aspiration. Consequently, it will manifest and it will unfold and it would strengthen itself to be reflective in your mouth, in all your limbs, which, because you want HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you know where's HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in his Torah. You want Hashem? It's in the Vlad Gemara. You want Hashem? It's in Allah. You want Hashem? It's in Pedic Tanya. You want HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you feel you want to come with do a mitzvah, because the mitzvahs are Ivanim de Malka, the Zayar says. Not only you're listening and obeying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's commands, which that exists as well. Hashem is a melech, Hashem is a king, he's a master. But there's something deeper, and this is what Shleima Melech in Shir HaShirim, which Rabbi Akiva says, everything is Kodesh, Shir HaShirim is Kodesh, HaKadoshim. What was behind the message of Rabbi Akiva is because that's where we can really, really connect deeply, intimately with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the Zayar says, every mitzvah is an aver, is a limb of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Do 248 mitzvahs, I say, are 248 limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You do a mitzvah, you're embracing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You do another mitzvah, you're embracing HaKadosh Baruch Hu more. It's a deep hug, you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's an embrace, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is embracing you. That's closeness, because Hashem's limbs are His mitzvahs. And when it comes to Torah, that's where the deeper connection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is established. As the Alter Rebbe writes in the end, many other places as well, by the end of Mem Hey, the 45th chapter in Likutei Amarim, also a click away, that learning Torah is an intimate relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Davening, of course, is an intimate relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in Torah, and because I have an aspiration to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that, and the more I meditate on that, the more it manifests in my mind and my heart. Of course, that would immediately reflect this case of this drive, this pine to HaKadosh Baruch Hu would reflect in my mouth and all my limbs to occupy myself with Torah mitzvahs, in learning Torah, doing Hashem mitzvahs, dafka bahem, to cleave and adhere to them, which is B'Hashem mamash. To them, B'Hashem. Look how the Alter Rebbe writes, Bahem, which is Hashem mamash. Is it Hashem or it's the halacha, the Blad Gemara, the Peirik Tanya, the mitzvah? Which one is it? Yeah, it's the same. Because Hashem and His Torah are one. You want to find Hashem, it's in His Torah. You want to embrace with Hashem, do a mitzvah. Want to be truly deeply connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, learn Torah, daven, and so on. So Alter Rebbe writes, "Val kaisav zeh." Maybe we'll leave this part for the next week. Perhaps we'll leave this for the next week. We'll stop by Val kaisav zeh. So Alter Rebbe is basically saying you don't have the pleasure yet. This is more the pine. This is more the drive. Pleasure is when you're there, you're in the bosom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the experience of the first Abba. This is a drive to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I never want to disconnect. I always want to be close. This Alter Rebbe is going to write, is going to explain this in a few words again, yet again. He did it before so clearly, but again, as he culminates this chapter, this Igeres, with a few words, he says the difference of the first love and the second. Because here, there's not necessarily any pleasure yet. It's the drive, the passionate drive he has towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he knows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in Torah mitzvahs, and therefore I will learn more Torah and do more mitzvahs, and constantly to learn Torah and constantly mitzvahs. And again, if I need to rejuvenate that battery of identifying consciously, identifying with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm going to meditate and ponder the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Or not only the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but in this case, the Chaya Chaim HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the source of life. He's the source of my life. And there's no other life and force and energy and flow into my system, into my neshama, other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the only thing I want as such. And if it's the only thing I want, I aspire, I'm able to ignite my heart. How much can I ignite my heart? Not necessarily could we find the tzaddik experience, which his heart is on fire on a constant basis towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the time of davening, yes, we have to utilize Yom Yom Hashem to be able to tap into this bonus every day. At the time of davening, I can. By the time of davening, I can. Yes, it's a bonus. Yes, of course, it's a bonus. It's not who I am as a Beinoni. Again, this is the crux of the Alter Rebbe's presentation at the very beginning of Likutei Amarim. But together with that, it says that you have the ability to connect to the level of tzaddik. So of course, do it every day. And not only that, the more you'll daven every single day, the way you're meant to. Of course, we say daven. Everybody davens every day, but davening the way davening is meant to be daven, to have that true delight and pleasure in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which again, it's that when you say the tzaddik bonus or the bonus of the tzaddik moments. So therefore, just like the tzaddik has that tainik, I can tap that into that tainik. But after davening, not necessarily I'll have that tainik which the tzaddik carries on for 24/7. Depends what level the tzaddik, how intense the tainik is, as we mentioned before. But I could be able to carry it on, never to lose focus, to be excited about Kodesh Baruch Hu, to know that even at any given time of the day, not necessarily the experience, the sensation is the same. The exhilarating sensation is the same after davening than at the time of davening. But nonetheless, I could carry on that message and meditate and ponder, and of course, how would it reflect that I never want to sever my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's like if you ask the child, "Oh, why do you want to connect to that to your parents? Why were you so devastated when you didn't see them?" There's no explanation to it. This is my parents, and I never want to disconnect. And yes, of course, I'll be devastated. You'll never be able to soothe me with every ride in the amusement park. I just need to be together with my parents. It doesn't have to know all the details. And why? And the parents are there. What do they do for you? It's just my parents. And the Yid understands that the Eibishter's Chayin Nishmasei, he wants to connect. How does he connect? With learning Torah and doing Hashem's mitzvahs. Hashem and His Torah